Chris Hunter was the British Army's most experienced counter-terrorist bomb disposal specialist in Iraq and served in the Balkans, East Africa, Northern Ireland, Colombia, and Afghanistan. He led counterterrorism efforts as an intelligence analyst and specialized in deconstructing the tactics of suicide terrorists. He is the director of a counterterrorism consultancy group and provides regular training and services to the United States. I caught up with him as he was on assignment in Malta to ask him about the mass shooting in Las Vegas.
I've heard from so many security experts that say a target like this in a large open-air entertainment venue is a very difficult target to harden.
It is. I mean, that's the plain and simple truth of it. It's easy to keep it secure at ground level, from the actual sort of the view of the person on the ground. But when you're looking at high ground and likely firing points, it's very, very difficult to dominate them. And the only way we really do that is to have snipers deployed, sort of counter-sniper teams, and that's going to be threat dependent. We'll do a survey of the likely firing points, and then the other way to do it is to have helicopters flying over, dominating the area, so that it dissuades the perpetrator from carrying out any sort of hostile attack. Now, first of all, you've got a music venue, so they're not going to welcome having helicopters flying over throughout the duration. But what you've really got to do is go right the way back to the actual threat assessment itself. And was there any threat to this particular event? And the answer would be, unless there was specific intelligence, then it's no. There's never been an incident like this in the past. Is the event more iconic than other iconic events that are taking place across the United States? Have we ever seen this sort of incident take place in the United States before? And then, the way it was actually enacted with, something like 19 confirmed firearms, as opposed to, the other 23 that were found, or whichever order that was in, 19, I think, at the place of residence, 23 on the site. There's been a lot of conjecture about whether or not it was automatic gunfire that could be heard. And I can tell you as a fact, having been on the receiving end of automatic gunfire, having been ambushed myself, that was definitely automatic gunfire, which means the perpetrator either had access to fully automatic assault weapons or was able to modify the assault weapons to become fully automatic. So when you combine all of these things together, there are a significant number of firsts here. And would it be reasonable to suggest that the police, the law enforcement community, the intelligence agencies could have anticipated this attack? I would say not a chance, and nor should they have been expected to do so.
After the attack in France at the concert, what kind of changes were enacted, and what can the United States learn from Las Vegas and from that event in France and Paris that will help us in the future train our security personnel?
I think there's a lot that could be learned from those incidents, but not that would necessarily be relevant to this particular attack in Las Vegas. And the reason I say that is because they were attacks that took place at ground level, if you like. And they were attacks that took place in bottlenecks, in choke points. I'm not really sure there could be much more that could be done other than looking at the intelligence. Certainly from this point on, whenever there's sort of a security survey takes place, then this particular incident will be at the forefront of the security planners' minds, because they'll be saying, what's been happening in the past? What are the tactics we've seen in the past? Is it likely? Is it possible? And then, of course, that will draw them back to the likely firing points, those points that have got oversight of the venue in question. And then it'll be things like, doing checks of the individuals checking into the hotels. I think certainly one of the things that, was really lacking in Las Vegas was the lack of searches of people going into the hotels. In many European cities, there are walk-through X-ray detectors, metal detectors, as you go into any hotel, irrespective of whether you're a resident there, irrespective of how many nights you've been staying there. You have to go through these airport-style checks, and that was clearly lacking in Vegas. Had those been implemented, then the individual would never have been able to get the firearms, and certainly not that number of firearms, into the building. And of course, the real critical point, that what separates the United States from Europe and from many other countries around the world is the very controversial subject and sensitive subject of gun control.
Is there any lesson in any of this for civilians? A lot of us travel. We travel overseas. We go to big venues. We want to go to music festivals. Those are huge for especially young people right now. Are there any lessons in this for civilians?
There are, yes. I mean, we say in the United Kingdom, having dealt with the threat of terrorism from the IRA for over 30 years, and now the Islamist extremist threat, we used to have a saying, stay alert, stay alive. The Prime Minister uses a phrase, quite frequently, be alert, not alarmed. And I think that's more appropriate. As a bomb technician and as a soldier, I stayed alive by using the phrase, look at absence of the normal and presence of the abnormal. And if you see something that's abnormal, if you see something that sort of makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, then, if something doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, then almost certainly it isn't right. So report it. And the second thing is, if you're in any sort of incident like this, where there's a roving gunman or, a threat of continued harm to you, your family, friends, your loved ones, then we use the phrase run, hide, tell. Run away from the danger as quickly as you physically can do. If you can't run away from it, then find somewhere secure to hide. And the moment you've hidden and you're out of harm's way, immediate harm's way, then inform the law enforcement community. And there's another chain of thought saying, we shouldn't run, we should actually turn and fight. And I think, if you're a former or serving serviceman, if you're law enforcement community, if you're confident you can deal with the threats, then of course, if it was someone like me, I would quite happily have a go back if the situation determined it was, more appropriate to do so. And I think there are certainly, when we look at roving knife crime, that sort of thing, roving knife terrorism in the UK, there is a compelling argument for actually, joining forces, strength in numbers, and actually overpowering the individual, as we've seen, of course, with United States personnel on the Eurostar, overpowering a terrorist, and as we've seen with individuals on various other modes of transport. But I think crucially, be educated, learn all you can about the terrorists, learn about their modus operandi, their tactics, their techniques, their procedures, and most importantly, have a plan. Run, hide, tell, or have another plan so that you can actually stay alive and remember to look for absence of the normal and presence of the abnormal.